Today I'm going to show you what I do with some of these garage sale finds that I just picked up over the weekend. I've got a lot of rusty and crusty and old things to work with, so stay tuned and come along with me as I create some beautiful decor. First, I'm going to work on this big pot. This is something that I found at the garage sale for $2, and I thought it was beautiful. I really love the crackle in the green, but I wanted to switch it up a little bit and make it a little bit more farmhouse looking. So the first thing I'm going to do is spray it with Rust-Oleum Clear Matte Finish. And the reason I'm doing that just on the shiny part is to make sure that my paint sticks. I'm going to paint the green portion just with sort of a dry brush, but a little bit thicker than that. Just one really rough coat. I want to have a little bit of that green showing through. That will also give it some texture along with the brush strokes that I'm using. I'm just using a regular flat white house paint that you can buy right off the shelf from Walmart. You don't always have to use chalk paint or specialty paints. You can definitely just get away with regular household paints. That's one of the reasons why I spray all of my shiny projects first with the matte clear finish. It gives this regular household paint something to grip to. I had put my paintbrush down and taken a step back and then decided that I really didn't like the way the brown and the white now was kind of clashing. So I'm just dry brushing whatever's left on my paintbrush with the white, and look at how all of that beautiful detail is just starting to pop. So I'm going to continue doing this for the bottom, and I'm also going to do the rim all along the top. If you like what you see so far, I would really appreciate it if you could hit the like button. That gets me noticed more on YouTube and helps my channel grow because I get more views that way. Last year, I made myself a lemon tree, and I actually replayed that video for you a couple of weeks ago. But it's just in this simple coffee can, and I wanted to upgrade this tree a little bit. So I thought my new pot would be the perfect addition to this lemon tree. I'm going to take it all apart, just got a whole bunch of foam in there and some rocks down at the bottom, and it is hot glued like 90 to the bottom of this can. So I'm going to work on getting that out, and then I'll show you how I redo it in the new pot. I do a lot of woodworking, and all of these little bits and pieces that are scraps, I always hang on to them, and this is the perfect opportunity to use them. I'm going to go ahead and tuck them into the pot just flat because I want to be able to just elevate my lemon tree a little bit higher. I don't want it sitting all the way down to the bottom. So I'm just going to keep on working with all of these pieces of wood, wedging them in, making sure that they fit really well and they're nice and snug. I have a larger piece in the bottom that's going to be the base of where I'm going to be able to glue the actual lemon tree on. So I'm adding a few more, just hot gluing them to make sure that they are secure. And then I'm going to go ahead and use some more hot glue and add the lemon tree. And then I've just got to hold it until the hot glue has a chance to set. I'm going to reuse the same foam that I had in the can, just wedge it all the way around and make sure that the styrofoam that's holding my branch or my tree is going to stay really solid. I don't want this to wiggle around when I move it. I'll also add a little bit of hot glue around the edges just to make sure all of that foam stays in place too. Finally, I'm just going to reuse the moss that I had used in the coffee can and just lay it around on top. I don't have quite enough of this type of moss, but I don't have anything left in my stash. So once I head out to the store, I'll be able to grab a little bit more. But I think this elevated my lemon tree to a much higher level. I think it looks absolutely gorgeous put together with this pot. All of these crusty things I got for $3 at the garage sale. So I think this pot would have been about $1. Anyhow, I just decided to clean it up and I'm going to be adding 3 of these little spindles as feet. These were the top of bedposts and I just thought they're the perfect color to complement this pot. Using my Weldbond glue, I'm just going to put them on and just set it aside to dry. Now, this did take a couple of days to cure just because it was a little cooler outside, but I didn't want to use any hot glue because it doesn't work with metal, to be honest. I've never been able to get hot glue to stick with metal, so I just thought I'll be patient and get these on there, and I think it turned out absolutely gorgeous. I'd like to take a quick second to thank all of my current viewers and subscribers. I really appreciate all the support that you give me by watching my videos. If you are new to my channel, thanks so much for stopping by. I would love it if you could hit that red button and stick around a while. My idea for this rake head was to put it on a board. I'm just using my Hoto brand new tape measure to measure that it's 14 inches, and I already have a board that's painted here that's about 22 inches. I decided to lay the rake head down. So the part where the handle would be is going to be the top of the wood board, and I'm using some of these pipe straps to hold it in place. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm just pushing in a little screw, and now I'm using my brushless drill from Hoto, and it just works so easily. It's a smart tool. It plugs in with a USB-C charger, and I think that is so convenient, and it's really lightweight, which really helps with my arthritis. Hoto tools are amazing. I have their glue gun. I have the tape measure, which is part of the screwdriver toolkit, and I'll show you that in just a moment. But this drill is something that I really enjoy using, and I think for some first-time beginner people who are just starting out with their power tools, this is compact and small, and it's super easy to use. I'll have a link for the drill down in my description box. I'm switching out the driver bit for a really tiny drill bit because I need to do some pilot holes for the eye hooks that I'm going to be using to hang a chain, which will then hang the sign. So super easy to change things out. You just spin the chuck around and it opens up or closes however you need to do it. This is a tiny little drill bit. I'm just going to eyeball my spacing and just give it a little bit of a push. So easy to do. Pre-drilling the hole makes it super easy to just hand tighten the eye hooks right into it. And then I'm just going to use this chain that I got from the Dollar Tree. They have them on their baskets, I think. So I just grabbed a couple of baskets and I just pulled off the chains, and I'm going to go ahead and use this to hang my little rake hook. And I think this turned out really sweet. This Hoto toolkit is absolutely gorgeous. And again, if you are just starting out with some tools for crafting or building, these are the perfect size. They're weighted nicely. That hammer is so nice to use. This is the precision screwdriver, which is battery operated, so you charge it with a USB-C, and it works really well. It has a really nice ergonomic and sleek look to it, so you can get into some tight spaces. There's some pliers, there are an adjustable wrench, and of course, the tape measure that I've already used. I am super impressed with Hoto tools, the quality of their products, and how well they work. I was skeptical at first with that drill. I didn't think that just having a USB-C charging lithium battery would give me enough power, but I have power and then some. So make sure you go down to my description box and click on the link for Hoto tools and check them out. For this project, I am using a board that's just a scrap piece. It's really rough on one side, but really nice and smooth on the other side. I'm taking my electric sander and I'm just going to round out the edges and the sides a little bit, make sure there aren't any splinters on it. I thought it would be fun to use this other round piece that I did pick up at the same garage sales. It was twice as long. I just used my miter saw to chop it in half. And now I'm going to take this board over to my table saw and just cut out some grooves on either side so I can fit this hollow piece of wood right on top of the board. I put some Weldbond glue down in the crevices and then I added some hot glue on the back to give the Weldbond glue a chance to set. I'm going to add some fasteners to the handle and the board just to make sure that it stays put. I'm undoing my cordless drill here from Hoto and adding a tiny little drill bit so I can pre-drill for my screws. I've got two more of these little pipe straps, and I'm going to use the needle nose pliers that came with my Hoto set to straighten them out and make them into an L shape. And that is what I'm going to use to attach the handle to the board much better. This pair of pliers, this is the first time I'm using them, and I really like them. They feel very comfortable in your hand, and they have a really good grip on them. To put the screws in, I'm going to use the Hoto electric cordless screwdriver. It has a really neat shape to it, and all of the materials of these tools are made with a really soft, it almost feels like suede, so it's really comfortable to hold in your hand. I've chosen the drill bit that I need, which came from the included drill bits that they have there, and I'm going to go ahead and attach the bracket. The screwdriver has a really convenient button that you can actually press and hold at the same time that you're just gripping the screwdriver. You're going to see me push the button right there. It also has a reverse button if you need to take anything out. I've come back inside now and I'm going to give this board a coat of antique wax. And what I've done here is just sprayed some water on it because that will help me just to dilute the antique wax. I don't have it in a little bottle yet with some water to dilute it. I'm still working out of the original bottle. I probably will do that just because it makes it much more convenient and I won't have to use a spray bottle all the time. But for now, this is what I decided to do, and it worked out really well. And you can see that color is blending right in with the handle. I'm going to attach this fun rooster hanger to the board, and I'm going to use my screwdriver one more time. Really easy to get it in this board. I didn't have to pre-drill because this is a piece of soft pine, and it went in really well. To camouflage the brand new screws and make them look old like the rooster, I'm just using a little bit of antique wax and dabbing it on just to dull the shine. My local Dollarama store had these cute little mini utensils for gardening, and they would be for indoor houseplants. That's why they are so tiny. But to make them look a little bit old, I'm also going to use some of the antique wax, just dull down the shine a little bit. I'm also going to put some on the handles of the wood pieces and actually that sort of leathery kind of blue color that's there as well, just to make everything look a little bit more old. The last thing I'm going to do is drill a hole through the top so I can put some twine in and hang it somewhere. So I'm using my Hoto drill again and making sure that I have the button pressed to drill and not screw in because that just gives it a little bit extra force. So again, this works so nicely. I love these tools. They're really convenient, small, compact, and really great for that first-time crafter. I also added just a little touch of greenery to the handle. This last project will just be a double-sided sign on this tag that I got from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to work on taking off all of the paper and smoothing it down. I'm using a sage color of paint that I actually pre-mixed in the bottle. I had a bottle of Martha Stewart Antique Sky chalk paint and I just found it was too bright. So I just added some gray and a couple of other green colors to make a beautiful sage. And I'm going to just do the back portion where the sign was originally and the sides because I have something different planned for the top. I found this sweet pack of wood look vinyl pieces at my Dollarama store. They're really nice and small, but look at how pretty they are. I decided to grab the one that has a little bit of sort of a greeny blue color. What I'm going to do is just peel off the back and then stick it on the tag here and then cut out the excess. I put this on just like I would be putting on some contact paper, folded the backing down, smoothed it onto the edge where I needed to start, and then just pulled the backing out from underneath, holding my hand and making sure I don't have any bubbles. It went on really well. I'm just going to crease around the edges, and that will help me to get the edges off. I cut out two different designs using my Cricut, and for the back of the little sign, I'm using the phrase, "Don't mind the weeds, we're feeding the bees." And I'm just going to go ahead and stick that on, and I will have both of these designs available as a free printable on my website. That link is also down in my description box. On the other side of the sign, I'm going to put the words "Find me in the garden," and I'm using white vinyl for this because I just thought it would show up a little bit nicer on this and make it just look a little bit different. So I just thought this would be so cute to hang on the rake and then be able to show people, hey, I'm in the garden, so find me in the garden. Or if you're not in the garden, you could be feeding the bees. Thank you so much for joining me today and watching my video. I hope you enjoyed these projects and got some inspiration to create some fun and almost free garden decor. If you like these, here's a couple more you might enjoy too. Bye for now. Hi there. Welcome to the Schwowin's Nest. My name is Sandra. Here on my channel, I love farmhouse decor, and I really love making something out of nothing. If that sounds like fun to you, I would love it if you could stick around and keep watching. What? This project is probably my favorite out of all of them that I'm doing today. I'm starting off with a piece of linen, sort of like drop cloth fabric, and I've cut out a piece of cardstock in the same shape. I'm going to be making a cone, but this shape is a little too rounded at one end. It should have had a little bit more angles to it, so I'm going to end up having to trim some of it. So gluing the edges in like I'm doing now is kind of not worth it in this part right here, but it will be fine for the rest of it. I just wanted to have a nice clean edge, and because I'm going to have to cut some of this, I'll show you what I'm going to do to fix it. So I'm trying to make a cone shape out of this, and it was a bit of a struggle. I should have folded the one little piece over the one edge so I would have a crease, then it would have been much easier to work with. But I'm just going to do my best and hot glue both of these edges together and make sure they're secure. It's going to take a little bit of time because the hot glue was a little too hot and it just really didn't hold very well. So I had to hold it down quite a long time until it was set. I know it's a little early in the video, but if you don't mind, I'd love it if you could hit that like button, especially if you do like my video. Two things. It lets me know that you like the kind of content that I'm putting out. And the second thing is it lets YouTube know that you like what I'm putting out and they promote me more, which helps my channel grow. I'm a little off camera here. I do apologize for that, but this is where I decided to cut the cone so it would be more straight all along the top. I was a little long in my template, so I'm just going to even it out. Now that I've got some raw edges all the way along the top again, I'm just going to cut out another couple of pieces of the linen fabric. I'm going to glue them on the inside and then fold them over to kind of create a little hem hanging over the top of the cone. Because the cone is round and my fabric is a straight line, I did have to kind of gather it just a little bit and kind of turn it and make sure that it was following the edge of the cone. Once I'm done with this portion, I will glue the other side down and this will create a pretty little hem. Then I'm going to have to add another piece for the back part of the cone. So I decided that I wanted to add a stencil to the front side of the cone. And if I would have been a little smarter or thinking outside the box or ahead of myself, I would have done this on the fabric while it was still flat. So I would recommend doing that first because this was a little tricky. I had to hang on to the stencil and try not to squish the cone at the same time while I added the paint to it. I'm just going to be using some black multi-surface paint that is from folk art, so it's good for any type of material, but I like to use this when I'm doing fabric. I'm just using a small chip brush so I can get into all the little details of the stencil, and you don't want to load your brush too much because then you'll just get big blobs everywhere. So I did have to readjust the stencil because every once in a while my hand that was holding it slipped and then I had to kind of realign it. But I think it turned out pretty nice anyway. I'm going to start filling the cone with pieces of pool noodle. Thank goodness it's summertime up here in Canada because we finally got some pool noodles at our dollar stores. They're so much better to use and so much more inexpensive to use than the floral foam. I'm just going to cut down all sorts of bits and pieces and then glue them into the cone, making sure that it's nice and sturdy and it's not going to be too squishy. I'm going to be adding a whole bunch of different florals in here. I'm going to start by adding some Spanish moss. This is from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to pull it apart and arrange it so it covers all of the green. I'm not going to bother hot gluing it down or pinning it in because as I put my florals in, that's going to keep it in place. For this arrangement, I'm using some lavender that I gave a light dusting of white spray paint to because they were a little dark in color. I'm using some of these beautiful Solowood flowers, and if you're interested in trying those out, I do have a link for them down in my description box. And I'm also going to be using a little bit of lamb's ear. So with the Solowood flowers, I added some bamboo skewers and I just pushed those into the bottom of the florals just very carefully. Some are a little shorter than others because I wanted some to be at the bottom and then some to be standing up towards the back. I'm using the lavender as my filler florals, and I'm just going to keep adding it in until I like the look of it. I want there to be quite a bit of lavender in between all of the Solowood flowers. I added the lamb's ear around the perimeter of the cone just so you could see it a little bit, drooping a couple of them down and adding a few little mini Solowood flowers, and I think this turned out beautiful. My second project is using these thrifted plates. They were actually from Pottery Barn and I got them for $6, six for $6, so a dollar each. I'm going to give them quite a few coats of some white chalk paint because it took a little bit to cover that and to get a nice smooth surface. But just the top, I'm going to leave the sides and the bottom as is. To make a bit of a frame and make sure that the white really pops, I'm just taking some of that black multi-surface paint and a flat paintbrush, and I'm going to go all the way around the edge of these plates. I want them to have sort of a framed out look, and I thought the black would be perfect because the wood underneath is a really super dark brown. It almost looks black too. If you've been watching my channel and following me for a while, you know that one of my favorite ways to transfer images is using tissue paper. It is so inexpensive. You can get a pack of at least 20 or 25 sheets of tissue paper from the dollar store, whether it's Dollarama, Dollar Tree, Dollar General, Walmart, wherever. It's going to be really inexpensive. You just take that tissue paper and you tape it onto a regular piece of photocopy paper and put it through your printer. Now I use a LaserJet printer and it works really well. I have had some people comment that the tissue paper gets eaten up. I would just recommend taping all the way around the tissue paper. Don't leave anything out and make sure that your tissue paper is a little bit smaller than the copy paper itself. If you're looking for a full tutorial on how to print on tissue paper, I've got that in my description box too, along with the link to my website where I'll have all of these free printables available for you. I always use Mod Podge when I'm working with tissue paper, unless I'm working with a full sheet, then I usually use a glue stick. But you put a small amount of Mod Podge on your project and then lay the tissue paper on top and then making sure your brush is always damp with Mod Podge. Go ahead and just go all over the top of it. I'm going to do the same with the label that I created at the bottom. I decided to do a little bit of distressing, so I'm taking that same little chip brush, doing a dry brushing technique, and I'm just kind of going around the rim of the plate for now, and then I'm going to go over the outside edges. I'm not going to go over the lemon because sometimes when your paintbrush hits the tissue paper, you get that outline showing up, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm just going to go very lightly and give it a distressed look. I've never been a big bow person, but ever since I figured out how to do the double loop two-finger bow, I've been doing it more often because they always turn out perfect. I've already made two in the black and white buffalo check or the gingham style. I've got a black with some white stitching, and now I'm going to do this little stripe here. Now that I have all my bows, I'm going to be adding a little bit of hot glue to the top two edges of the circle, and then I'm going to be gluing the actual loops right on top of the plate. And that will just hold it in place and it'll make it look like the plate or the plaque itself is all the way around. For a final touch, I'm going to add one little baby's breath from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to put that blossom right in the center of the bow, and then I'm going to add just a little piece of greenery, and these are all set to go. I really love how they turned out. If this is the first time you're visiting my channel, or you're coming over from Amy's channel, welcome. I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so happy that you decided to take some time out of your day to spend it with me. If you haven't already subscribed and you like what you see, I would really appreciate if you could hit that red button too. Last year before Christmas, I had bought a couple of these rugs, one in black, which is this one, and one in gray. They're about $3.50 at my Dollarama store because they're about twice the size of the ones you can get at the Dollar Tree. I didn't end up doing anything with them, so I had a great idea to make a cute little welcome mat for my front door. I went to my Cricut and I cut out the word welcome on some vinyl, and I'm just going to stick it down here and have a really tough time peeling off the transfer tape. And I'm not going to take you through that struggle, but I finally got it to stick. I'm using some of the white multi-surface paint, and I'm just using a stencil brush, and I'm pouncing up and down and making sure that I don't have any bleeding underneath my vinyl. It actually worked out really well. I tried using some chalk paint. That really didn't cover very well, so I ended up going with the multi-surface paint, and that seemed to do the trick. I did end up doing 2 coats though before I was finished. With the 2 coats, I didn't think it was going to be dark enough, but look at that. It turned out really well, and I'm really pleased with this multi-surface paint on the black. I do have to weed out a couple of areas, but then I'm going to be good to go. Also using my Cricut and some of this plastic poster board, I cut out a square template because I wanted this to kind of have the look of a buffalo check border, but it's not going to be 100% buffalo check. So basically white squares and black squares. And again, I'm just using my stencil and that multi-surface paint, and I'm just going to pounce to my heart's content until I get the border done all the way around. Using the same plastic poster board and my Cricut, I cut out another stencil. This is a couple of lemons with a few leaves, and I'm going to do the leaves in the green, and of course the lemons are going to be yellow. I've already got a couple that are stenciled on there. They didn't come out as solid as the others, but I'm okay with that. I think it looks kind of nice when it's not 100% solid. It gives it a little bit more texture and a little bit more dimension. Once I had my lemons done, I just took one of my oil-based paint pens and just drew a rough line connecting all of the white squares. It didn't have to be perfect, and I like it when it's not perfect because that's the rustic in me, and it was really easy to do. So it looks really good with that extra line as the border. Now it's time to do some freehanding. I'm using a stencil brush, but it's not a round one. It's more of a straight one or a flat one, maybe. And what I'm doing is just creating some lavender stems. And this is so easy to do. You just kind of put these little oval shapes and make them a little bit bigger as you're going down, or you can leave them all looking the same. It really isn't rocket science to do something like this. What I would suggest is if you want to do something like this, practice on a little bit of paper first until you get the hang of it, and then head on over to your rug and get creative. Using the same green paint that I used for the lemon leaves, I'm going to add some stems and a few little leaves to my lavender sprigs. And I am so pleased with how my rug turned out. This is going to be sitting on my front porch for the summer. I think it's perfect. Project number 4 is also using a thrifted item. This was a candelabra that I found at the thrift store long time ago, and it's just been waiting for me to do something with it. So I'm just taking some of these pliers or grips or whatever you want to call them, and I'm just taking that center metal piece and bending it back and forth really strongly until it pops off. I'm going to do that for all of them. Then I'm going to take some of these saucers that were also a thrift store find. I think I have 8 or 10 of them, and I think they were like $3. What I'm going to use is some of my Weldbond glue and some hot glue, and I'm going to actually put these right on top of the 3 spaces for the candelabra. This is going to give me some space where I can put something on or display some candles or put some vases on. It's going to open up a lot more possibilities than just candles. For this first center one, I was able to do it upside down to make sure that it was nice and centered. But then for the other ones, I'm going to have to flip it over. So I let this one set up for a little bit and then I flipped it over and glued the other two on the same way. As a crafter, and if you're a crafter, you know this, you save everything. These are two candle jars that I've had for a while. I keep all of this stuff in a bin down in my basement, and then I just go through it when I need something. I'm going to be gluing on two of these little drawer pulls, and I think these are perfect little cloches for my candelabra. My saucers are pretty much dried, and now I'm just taking some of this Rust-Oleum matte clear finish and I'm just spraying a little bit along the top and the sides because this is going to really help my chalk paint stick better. And I know chalk paint sticks to a lot of surfaces, but these are really slick. So anything that is ceramic or glass, I always put my sealer coat on first. While I wait for that to dry, I'm going to give this terracotta pot a coat or two of chiffon cream chalk paint. That's the chalk paint that I'm going to use for the saucers as well because it's the closest color that I could get to match the bottom of the candle. So just a couple of coats of this will work just fine. Now that the saucers are dry, I'm going to give them the same color. And it's not chiffon cream because that's a Rust-Oleum color. This is a folk art home decor chalk paint, and this is called sheepskin. I'm going to try and duplicate sort of the rough texture of the candelabra itself. So I'm just taking the side of my paintbrush here and putting on just a little bit of black paint. I'm going to go around the top, around the edges, and then around the bottom rim as well. I know this doesn't match perfectly, but I think the colors complement each other nicely. The other thought I had was to paint these saucers black and then leave the candelabra the beige color that it is. Let me know if you think that would look better because I toyed with that idea, but then I thought it might be a little too harsh with it being all black. But I'd love to know your opinion on that. I added some lavender into that little terracotta pot, and that will be the center attraction of this piece. My first project is using this thrifted bread box. I've sanded it down and I'm going to give it a coat of clear matte sealer to block out any of the stains. Then I'm going to take it outside and using my flat white spray paint, I'm going to give it a couple of good thin coats. You want to make sure that you don't put it on too heavily because then it'll end up dripping. I'm also using my favorite spray paint trigger from Krylon. I do have it listed down in the description box. I've also got it on a piece of cardboard so I can easily just spin it around while I'm painting. These are some spindle feet that I cut down from a bed that I picked up off the side of the road. Lucky me, I was so excited when I found it. I'm going to just drill some holes right into the center of each of the little spindle legs because I need somewhere for the screw to go when I attach it to the bread box. Here I'm trying to figure out where I want to put the legs. Ideally, I would want them in the corners, but at the top here, there isn't an extra piece of wood. So I decided that putting them on the inside would be too close together. I'm going to go get a piece of painter stick and another little piece of wood and see if I can match the thickness of the bottom piece. I'm going to use my favorite Weldbond glue to attach both of these wood pieces to the bottom of the bread box. Weldbond glue is a permanent hold and it sticks to anything. So you can glue wood, metal, plastic, glass, ceramic, anything. It'll work. That's why I love it because I only need one glue for all of those different materials.
Now that the glue has set up enough for me to be able to work, I'm going to use my drill and drill a hole at the bottom of the bread box in each of the four corners where I want the legs to be. When I'm doing projects like this, I usually wing it, which means that I don't measure where I need the holes to go. I just eyeball it. But if you need to measure, go right ahead. There's nothing wrong with that. I just am a little bit lazy when it comes to stuff like that. So I just want to get the job done. I made sure to make the drill holes big enough that I could just slide the screw through from the inside. Then I'm going to use a screwdriver to hold it in place and then take the leg and just screw that in. And it turns out super tight and secure. I'm just going to repeat the process for the other three legs. I created some cute little decals using my Cricut Joy, and I'm going to put them on the bread box. So this bottom one has a spade and a rake, I guess you would call them. I can't remember the name of the small ones. And just the words garden tools. Again, as usual, I will have these listed on my website as free printables for you. So just go down to my description box and click on the link free printables. I don't usually show you the process of how I take the transfer tape off and work with these decals, but I thought I would show you today just because the letters were giving me a little bit of an issue and I wanted to just show you how I take care of that. So sometimes it'll start to peel up. And for example, the shovel right away was peeling up. So I just used the soft end or the rounded end of my Cricut tool here, the weeder, and just burnish it down a little bit more. And that just helps to make sure that the letters will stick properly. Another tip I have for you is if it's not coming off when you're pulling the transfer tape off in one direction, try switching the direction. So here it was still giving me issues. So I just started going from the bottom instead of the side. And then I ended up having to use my little weeding tool to actually pick it off the transfer tape and stick it down. That capital G just did not want to get off that transfer tape. I love how this bread box turned garden toolbox turned out. It was a special request from my mom, who lives in an apartment and didn't have anywhere to store her garden tools on her balcony. So I created this little thing for her, and she loves it just as much as I do. And I hope you guys love it too. The second project I have for you today is also a bread box, but it's huge. I'll show you that in a few minutes. I'm just taking these table legs that were given to me by a friend. The top of the table was in really bad shape, so she didn't even give me the top. She just gave me these legs. They're a really red mahogany color, and I don't like that, and they're very shiny. So I decided to take my sanding sponge and go over them really well with the sandpaper just to get rid of the shine and also take off some of that red stain. I'm going to give the table legs one good coat of Rust-Oleum paint and primer in one in flat black. And I thought that would just be a really nice accent against the white of the bread box. I didn't bring my turntable outside with me, but the cardboard seems to be working really well too. And this way I can actually just pick it up and set it aside while it's drying. I know I said earlier that I don't normally plan things out, but in this case, it's a little different. These legs have a really peculiar shape, and I did want to make sure that I had them all facing the right direction. So I'm just taking a pencil and tracing out where I want them to be. Now, I am still eyeballing the position of them, but the pencil line will help me to drill right in the center. I'm also doing the same thing here. I'm using a drill bit that is a little bit larger than the size of the screw, so I can easily just push it through from the inside of the bread box. Here you can see that I've pushed the screw through. I'm holding it again on the inside with a screwdriver, and then I'm just going to screw the table leg all the way on until it is really snug and secure. Here's what this monster of a bread box looks like. It's almost 2 feet wide, so I'm not even sure it was a bread box, but it did have a lid. I chose to take the lid off for this project, and now I'm just going to go around the edges with my sandpaper, sand it off, and make it look nice and distressed. This was something that was part of my mammoth painting spree that I did a couple of months ago in my garage, where I took all of my wood pieces, I painted them black with spray paint first, then I did a coat of clear coat on top to prevent any stains from coming through, and then I did a couple of coats of just regular latex white paint. I'm back inside again, and for this project, I decided to create a tissue paper printable. If you're interested in learning how to do tissue paper printables, I will have a link down in my description box to my Sandra's Tech Spot channel where I have a full tutorial on how to do tissue paper printing. I'm just applying a thin coat of Mod Podge where I want my first transfer to go, and I've cut it out really close to the design, and I'm going to center it as best I can because once I get it down, I'm not going to be able to peel it up again. Always make sure that you have some Mod Podge on your brush. If your brush is too dry, you'll end up tearing the tissue paper. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I hope you like farmhouse decor, thrift flips, dollar store DIYs, and some wood decor. I'd love for you to stick around. Hit that subscribe button. It's absolutely free and it really helps my channel grow. This is the actual free printable. As I said earlier, I did print out 2 of them and I cut apart some of the herbs so I could add them onto the box. Because it's such a large surface, I thought it would look much better with the addition of a few herbs on either side. Here I'm just adding a little bit more Mod Podge to cover the front of the box completely. I will be sealing it with a spray sealer, but sometimes the Mod Podge is a little bit of a different finish. Even though they're both matte, they're 2 different products, so I like to just make things look cohesive. This box looks absolutely amazing on my front porch. I am in love.
The first project I have for you today is using part of this wood bed frame. I cut a whole bunch of bed frames down into different size spindles, and what I'm trying to do here is create a V cut in the center. I used my table saw just to get some initial cuts. I'm trying to use this little hacksaw, and I'm going to use some needle nose pliers to try and pick out those pieces of wood. But I ended up going back out to my garage and using this multi-tool with all these accessories. I was able to cut in on an angle, and that one got the job done. Now I'm using these 2 pieces of scrap wood cut into squares. The bottom one is a 2x6 and the top one is a 2x4. I'm going to glue them together using Weldbond glue. This glue is so amazing. It is like totally solid when you glue things together. This is my favorite glue to use. I use it instead of using a wood glue and then a crazy glue. This is an all-purpose glue that will put anything together. I'm also adding just a little bit of hot glue so I can continue to work on this piece while the Weldbond glue dries. This is another piece of spindle from the same bed. I'm going to do the same thing with it, use some Weldbond glue and some hot glue, and then glue it down right into the center of the blocks. This is a birdhouse that I got on clearance at Michael's. I'm going to glue that on top of the spindle. I need to balance this, so I'm taking a couple of these tumbling tower blocks on either side of the peak. I have the birdhouse sitting upside down, and this will help me get it in the center. I don't trust myself to be able to take the birdhouse and place it in the center on top of the spindle, so I'm going to do it the other way around. This is what the project looks like so far. I've had success gluing the birdhouse right on top of the spindle. Here's a really close-up look at that V that I cut out of the wood. What I need to do is make sure that that can sit on top of the birdhouse. That's why I cut out the V. I'm making a double birdhouse topiary, and I thought this would be a really cute idea to have on my front porch. So the same thing, I'm going to take my Weldbond glue and hot glue and then just center it as best I can. And I believe I used a little bamboo skewer just to make sure that it was going to be straight. The spindle is dry and I've already prepped it on top with some more Weldbond glue and hot glue so I can stick on the second birdhouse. Now it's time to paint. I'm going to do the base of the birdhouse in white. I'm also going to do the birdhouse bodies in white. Here you can see that the main body of the birdhouse is painted white. I did the small one as well. Now I'm just going to dry brush some white chalk paint over the brown spindle. I like the brown look, but for this I wanted to do something a little bit different. And I didn't want to sand anything down. I just wanted to give it more of an aged look. I'm going to paint the base of the birdhouse and the roof in Eucalyptus by Martha Stewart Vintage Chalk Paints. I got this on clearance at Michael's just after the holidays, and I really love this color. The other color on the birdhouse above it is going to be Rust-Oleum chalk paint in Serenity Blue, and I'm going to do the base and the roof as well. Of course, I have to also distress the base of this. So I'm using some dark walnut gel stain, and I've just got it in a little bowl here. And I'm using a dry brush method to just put on a little bit, and then I'll add more if I feel it needs it. Then I decided that the gel stain was a little too brown. I'm trying to stay away from browns because I just painted the candlestick, which was brown, a different color. So I'm going ahead with some dark gray chalk paint over the white, and that just helps to make it look even more old and weathered. I also decided to take some of the gray and go over the white a little bit. It was looking a little too stark white on the candlestick, so I'm just going to add a little bit more dimension to that as well. Of course, since everything on this piece is distressed, I also had to distress the rooftops. I'm taking a small little chip brush with a little bit of white chalk paint and just dragging it from top to bottom, giving it a little bit of distressing. I am head over heels for this birdhouse topiary, and I hope you like it too. The next project I have is using these corks. I'm also going to be using some tumbling tower blocks, which are the medium-sized ones, not the small ones that you can get at the Dollar Tree. I'm going to make somewhat of a crate slash log cabin slash box. I don't know. You'll have to tell me what you think it is at the end. But anyhow, I'm going to go ahead and glue some of the corks together to make a base. And then the next layer will be tumbling tower blocks. I'm putting the hot glue on the side of the tumbling tower blocks so they stand up a little taller, and then they end up being about the same height as the corks. I'm going to start with another row of corks, then one more row of the blocks, and then I'm going to finish it off with another row of corks. I'm also using my miter shears to cut the corks. This is like butter. It's so easy to cut little pieces of cork to make sure that all of your pieces fit together well. So if you're interested in those miter shears, I have a link down in my description box. I decided to use this Varathane gel stain in the color dark walnut. It's my absolute favorite. And I love gel stain because it's really nice and thick and you can control it. So my idea was to create a watered down gel stain. I added water into this jar, but this is an oil-based stain. And I don't know what I was thinking when I was doing this, but if you're any type of a cook, you know that oil and water do not mix. So I was stirring it, and nothing happened. I finally had to put the lid on it and shake the bejeebies out of it. It did kind of blend together, but I really didn't get what I was looking for. It did dilute the stain a little bit, but not the way it should have been. So, lesson learned. I have to remember that I need oil and water with water. I decided to apply it with a paintbrush. I did have to shake the bottle a couple of times throughout the use, but I really love how the stain turned out. You can still see the lettering through the corks. You can see a little bit of the wood grain on the wood blocks, and I think it was a really good choice to stain it instead of paint it. I've got it sitting on a piece of cardboard and I'm just going to trace out the interior shape because I'm going to make up my own custom little cardboard box. I want to be able to leave the bottom open, so if I want to put this on top of a different plant down the road, I can do that. I wanted it to be fairly versatile. So what I'm doing now is just cutting out the square, and I'm not going all the way through even though I am using my craft knife. I just kind of want to score it so I can bend it easier to hot glue it. Then I'll be cutting out the corners and that will make a really simple box. I'm just going to glue it together with some hot glue. I am totally in love with these Sola wood flowers. I'm going to take a bamboo skewer and I'm going to give each of them a stem. It's really easy just to poke that skewer down into the center of the flower and you've got a perfect stem for it. You can also then cut the bamboo skewer down to whatever size you need. I'm going to be using just an assortment of different florals and I'm going to just make myself a small little arrangement. Okay, so I've created my box and now I need to add some floral foam to it, and check out this cool little cutter that I have. You got it. It's the straight edge from the Dollar Tree. It is a perfect floral foam cutting tool. It doesn't make a mess and it cuts through everything really, really nicely. I've pushed my box through and now I'm just taking my fingers underneath it and giving it a little bit more of a push to elevate it a little bit more. I don't want to have to do so much filler, so being able to just push that box up and down the way I want it is perfect. I'm going to start arranging my Sola wood flowers. I'll start with the two largest flowers. I'm also going to make them the tallest. Then I'm just going to start grouping the flowers a little bit farther down each time, working my way around and creating a nice mound of flowers. I've also got some of these greenery picks from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to cut off those little fern-like branches and add them into the arrangement. I've got one of the little green spiky ones way up at the top, and then I'm just going to keep adding them in until I like the look of it. I don't want too much green, but I just love this soft green color. It works so well with the wood flowers. I just love how this project turned out. The combination of the delicate Sola wood flowers with the rustic cork and wood bottom just looks absolutely gorgeous. I hope you love it as much as I do.
My first DIY for you today is using this spoon and fork. They're bamboo and they were picked up at my local grocery store. I just put some painter's tape in the exact same spot on each of the utensils just so I know that that's where I need to stop with the paint. I'm starting off with some hunter green on the tip of both of the spoon and the fork. This will be the outside rind of my watermelon, but I'm also going to do the sides and the back. Is a little bit of an ombre effect. So I'm going to start off with my dark green and then add some white just to lighten it up into a lighter shade of green. And then that will be the inside portion of the rind. I'm going to make sure that they both look the same, and you'll see me moving back and forth between the two utensils just to make sure that the shades are very similar. I'm also going to move back and forth between my white paintbrush and the green paintbrush so I can get the right amount of blending in between. So you'll see me going back and forth and just trying to get a really nice blended shade. My favorite Craft Smart oil-based paint pen in black. It's a fine tip. I'm going to draw in some watermelon seeds. So it's going to be just a little oval with a point on one end, almost like a teardrop shape. I'm also going to stagger them and put them in sort of a random pattern. Actually, no pattern at all, because when you open up a watermelon, the seeds aren't symmetrical or all in a row. So I'm also going to turn them and just make some smaller, some bigger, and just make it very whimsical. The last step is to use some matte Mod Podge and give all of the painted areas a really good coat. I've let the paint dry really well before applying the Mod Podge because I don't want anything to smudge, and I'm going to go around the sides and the back. I also painted a tiny little black line just to give it a little bit more character. My next project is using this old wooden piece that I found in my garage, and I was lucky enough to have it already in this shape. It's perfect for a watermelon slice. I also dug up these red drawer pulls, and I'm going to use them as little riser feet for this tray. So what I'm going to do is take this out to my garage, drill some holes in where the screws need to be, and then fasten them in. First, I'm going to mark off where I using a lighter shade of green. This is called mossy green. And I'm going to just now do the same thing on the inside of the hunter green. And you can see here that I'm kind of being careful not to get that green on the bottom, but it will get colored green once I get around to the other side. I'm using the same color pattern that I did with the spoons, except for this time I'm using an extra color of the lighter green. But now I'm going in with some white and I'm just going to do a thinner stripe of white all the way around the semicircle. Then I'm going to start blending in the white, the light green, and the dark green just so they don't have harsh lines. I want them to be blended really well, just like I did on the spoon and fork. Using the same chalk paint from Deco Art in the Romance color and a large paintbrush so I can get this done really quickly, I'm going to go ahead and paint the entire inside of the white semicircle red like a watermelon. Here you can see that I'm starting to create a slice of watermelon. I'm using the white brush now and I'm going to blend in with the red to achieve a little bit of a pink blending color. Then I'm going to move on to the green and add a little bit of the green into the white and so on. So I'm just going to be blending all of the colors together until I get that harsh line gone and it looks the way I want it to. Once the blending was done the way I liked it, I took a dry brush and dipped it into the light green paint and just did some dry brushing around that outside green of the watermelon. I did it on the top and the sides. Using my Craft Smart black oil-based paint pen in the chisel tip, I'm going to now create some watermelon seeds on here as well. Again, same thing, sort of a teardrop effect, very randomly placed all around the inside red portion. Now I'm going to give everything a really nice thick coat of matte Mod Podge, and I'm going to let it dry completely. And there's a reason I'm doing this. I want to use my white oil-based paint pen on top of the red, and I don't want any of that red to catch onto my paint pen. So I'm going to do the Mod Podge first and then do some lettering afterwards with my white paint pen. I waited till the Mod Podge was completely dry, and now here's my white Craft Smart oil-based paint pen. I'm going to write the words Sweet Summertime down at the bottom of the slice, or the way you're looking at it, the top of the slice, the straight edge, and I'm going to use the skinny font, which is similar to a Rae Dunn style, but I'm going to just do it freehand and hope for the best. You're probably wondering what I'm doing here. When I do my lettering and I want something centered, I always start with the middle letters and work my way forward to the end of the word, and then I work my way back from the center to the beginning of the word. And that just ensures that it's as centered as possible without having to draw any pencil lines or using any tape.
My first project is using this nautical ship's wheel. This is just literally up on my computer screen. I made it bigger, and now I'm just going to tape a regular piece of paper onto my monitor and trace it out. For the purpose of my video, I wanted to use a black marker so you could see what I was doing. Unfortunately, it did leave a couple of black specks on my monitor screen. So you need to use a pencil, colored pencil, something that's not going to go through onto your computer. Here's the fully traced picture, and now I'm just going to cut it out. Now, what I ended up doing was just cutting a circle all the way around so I'd have less paper to have to handle. And then I started cutting out the actual picture itself. Partway through, I realized patio furniture should be white. It's the worst color because all you do is see the dirt. So what I'm going to do is spray paint it a beautiful coastal tealy blue color. It's really hard to describe, but it's a really pretty color. And so what I'm doing here is just peeling the paper off of the vinyl, and I'll be able to stick that down where I want it to be on my table before I spray paint it. I like most of my decor items to be a little off kilter. And what I mean by that is I'm not going to put this stencil in the middle of the table. I'm going to put it off to the side. I want to be able to see it when I'm using it. So if I'm putting a drink down or if I'm decorating with it, I want to be able to see the actual wheel, and then I'll have room on the other three sides to put some decor or my glasses or whatever I feel like doing. I'm just making sure that this is pressed down really nice and firm. I'm using some Krylon spray paint, which is really good for resin and plastic like this, and the color is called Global Blue. I'm going to do 2 thin coats and a third in a couple of spots. Favorite stencil letters. This was one of the first purchases that
The wreath that is currently hanging on my door. It's been here since late winter. This is what the lime wreath looks like hanging on my front door. I really love how it turned out. I love the colors of it. I'm into the lime green and I think it looks really pretty. I hope this gives you some inspiration to create.
Hi there, Sandra here from the Schwovin's Nest. I'm so glad you're here for another Dollar Store Saturday. This is where I take a bunch of dollar store items and make some beautiful high-end decor in a farmhouse style. I'm starting out with this oval wood cutout from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just giving it a coat of matte clear polycrylic. I want the color to be a little bit deeper, and you can see it does get a little darker, but I didn't want to stain it. I'm using a combination of white and natural woods in this project. I made this decal using my Cricut Joy and the Cricut Design Space app, and I will have it available as a free printable. You just need to go down to my description box and click on the link Free Printables, and then you'll be able to search through all of the things I have available. Next, I'm going to be using these painter sticks and I'm going to make a crate. Now, if you've been following me on my channel, you know that I love to make wooden crates. I know you can get the ones from the Dollar Tree. I didn't have any of those on hand, and because Ontario, where I live, is on lockdown, we don't have access to any crafting supplies right now. So I've got to create my own stuff. I'm cutting 6-inch pieces, and what I do with these painter sticks, because they're fairly thick and hard, I score it a half a dozen times, and then I take my miter shears and squeeze one way, and then I flip it over and squeeze the other way because the bottom part makes a mark on the other side. So I keep flipping it and squeezing and flipping it, and eventually I get to the point where I can just give it a good squeeze and it'll pop. These three 6-inch pieces will be the front of the crate. This will be the inside, so I'm just holding them together with a piece of popsicle stick and some hot glue. I cut 6 more pieces. These were 2 inches in length, and those will become the sides of the crate. I'm just going to go ahead and glue all of the pieces together, and then I'm going to use some of the larger tumbling tower blocks as braces for the corners. I also needed a bottom for the crate, but here I just put 2 pieces in because I just needed something that was going to be able to hold the floral foam in. I had given this palette just a little bit of a touch up with white paint, and now that it's dry, I'm going to distress it with my favorite color, black. I love to do distressing with black. I don't know, the combination of white and black just makes me happy. Using hot glue, I'm going to apply the Flower Market sign to the top of the palette. I'm gluing 2 of the tumbling tower blocks to the back of the little crate because that's going to help me secure it onto the palette. Using a tiny little drill bit, I'm going to drill 3 holes about 1.5 inches apart, but in the same level on one side of the palette. I'm going to be placing these beautiful little tacks in the holes. I'm also going to be using some of my Weldbond glue to make sure that they stay put. And these are going to be the little hooks for my little mini garden tools. The first 2 went through to the back, so I just put some hot glue on them to make sure no one gets hurt. Using a larger drill bit, I'm going to put a hole in the handle of each of the little tools so I can fit a piece of twine through, and that will become the hanger for them. These little mini garden tools were part of a houseplant garden set, and I got them at Dollarama for $2.50. I couldn't pass them up. They are absolutely adorable. Now it's time to get some greenery in my little flower box. I'm going to just place some hot glue in there and glue down some floral foam, and then I'm going to start working on adding some greenery. I wanted this to be more greens than florals, so I added a few different types of just greenery plants, and then I added a little bit of the baby's breath that you can get at the Dollar Tree just to add a little spice of color, but they're white. white, so I guess they're not really colorful, but I think it turned out pretty adorable. I love this sign and I hope you like it too. Oh, and I forgot to tell you that I also added another little decal to the little box, and I think that just added the perfect touch. My second project is also using Dollarama supplies. This is a breadboard. It was $4, and you can see I've already done something to it, but I'm going to repurpose it for this one. I'm also using a couple of these sink sponge baskets because they're flat on the back, and I thought, how adorable is that? These would turn into some really cute planters. I'm just going to cut off these little nibs that are on the back. I don't need that, and that will just help me to lay it flat onto the board when I'm ready to glue them on. I just love using these scrapers. I got this one from a different dollar store, but I know Dollar Tree carries them and I think they're pink and black. I had a couple of those too. So I'm going to go ahead and just scrape off any of the excess hot glue. But then I started to also scrape off some of the white paint, and you can see here it's coming off really great. I can just do this instead of sanding, and it just helps me to keep the dust and everything all in one spot. So I'm not getting it everywhere. It's staying right here on the board. This is something I kind of fell upon, so I wanted to share it with you. If you don't want to do any sanding, just do some scraping. That works too. Since this was already painted brown and black, I'm going to do some white dry brushing. I'm starting off a little bit lighter, but then I'm going to get a little bit darker, mostly towards the center. I want the edges to still have some of that brown showing through. The store had white baskets and gray baskets, and I thought I would just use them white, but here I am spray painting them gray. I also sponged them with some dark gray metallic paint, which unfortunately I forgot to turn my camera on when I was doing that. I wanted them to have a little bit of a galvanized finish. I'm using some of this burlap ribbon that I picked up at Michael's, and I'm just going to line the inside of the basket with this and then fold it over a little bit so it goes over the rim. I made some slits in the ribbon and I also trimmed it down. It was a little too long. Now I'm going to just use some hot glue and fold over the little flaps so it looks like it's a little liner inside my little bucket. I'm just going to add some hot glue and then stick in a tiny little piece of floral foam. And the greenery I'm going to use for both of these buckets is going to be different, but it's going to be just green. I wanted this to look like it was a little herbal garden that could be hanging on the wall. So one of them is going to be parsley and the other one is going to be oregano. The top lip of the basket stuck out a little bit, so I'm putting some hot glue down and a piece of stir stick to make it be flush. This way I can just put the glue on the stir stick and glue it right onto the board. Using my Cricut again, I cut out the words parsley and oregano, and I'm just going to place those underneath each of the buckets. Adding a couple of extra finishing touches, I'm just wrapping some twine around the center underneath the word parsley, and I'm just going to crisscross them a little bit to give it more interest. I'm also going to wrap some twine on the very top of the board and tie a sweet little bow. This last project is using some of these tumbling tower blocks that I get at Dollarama. I'm going to just glue 4 of them together to create a square. I've got a piece of a bed that I took apart a couple of weeks ago, and I'm just going to use some hot glue and glue it right onto the tumbling tower blocks. Next, I'm using this little solar lantern. I think I've had this in my stash since last year. I'm going to just take it apart because I want to be able to just work with the base for now. I've taken some of these paint stir sticks and cut them down to size. What I want to do is glue them on the base of the lantern to make it look more chunky. I'm going to do the same thing to this plank from the Dollar Tree just to make it look like it's a block. You could use a piece of wood if you have it. I didn't have anything that was square at the moment, and I just did not feel like getting out my table saw. It makes a mess in the garage. Now that the box is complete, I'm going to glue in these tumbling tower blocks, one in each corner, just to give the box more stability. I'm going to glue the bedpost and the tumbling tower block combination right onto my faux block. I decided also to glue some tumbling tower blocks inside the base of the lantern so it would have more support too. As I was painting this white plastic lantern, it wasn't taking the paint very well. So I ended up having to wipe that off and give it a couple of coats of flat black spray paint, which was easier anyway and faster because I was able to get into all of those corners and nooks and crannies. The wood here on this one took the paint really well, and I was able to get away with just doing one coat even on the bed leg. So here at the bottom of the screen, you can see the lantern in black and the pedestal or candlestick or whatever you want to call it also painted. But I wanted to put a little handle because on the top of the lantern, there's two little loops where there used to be a plastic handle. I've taken a piece of wire and a couple of pieces of just some butcher twine, and I'm just going to be wrapping that around and making a handle. I'm going to slide the wire right into the little holes on the top of the lantern and tie everything off. I'm going to be using some white chalk paint and a dry brush to dry brush and distress the candlestick all over. The only part that I'm going to not distress is the lantern. I want that to stay solid black so it looks a little bit different. Then I simply glued both pieces together. To decorate the lantern, I'm going to be adding a little bit of moss. I'm just going to tear it apart and shove it in there. And I'm just going to use one little tiny succulent. I tried putting two in, but I didn't like the look of that. So I'm just going to drop one tiny little succulent in the center. I really hope you liked these garden decor DIYs today. It's part of my dollar store Saturday, and it was a lot of fun creating these. If you like what you saw, please give me a thumbs up and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. Thank you so much for watching. This next project is using this adorable little produce basket that I picked up for $2 at the thrift store. I also got a bag of these corks that were $2.99. I think there's probably about 50 corks in each bag. I just got the one bag, but they were still sealed in the original packaging, so they had never been touched. So excited to have something brand new from the thrift store to work with. I'm going to use hot glue and just put these on north, east, south, and west. Hot glue is going to work perfectly for this application because it's a raw cork and I'm gluing it to raw wood. There isn't any painted surfaces, so hot glue is fine. I had a couple of ideas for this little basket. I wanted to make it kind of look more like a little modern farmhouse thing. So I decided to use my white chalk paint and just start painting every second slat on the bottom. I didn't like how that looked, so I decided then to just paint every slat, but leaving the part underneath or in between the slats the natural color. And this is what I ended up doing with it. I thought this looked really great. I also decided to paint the corks white and the middle band so that would all be a cohesive look and just bring everything together. Then I decided to paint the wood handle portion white because then when it hung down, it just kind of brought a little bit more white to the top of the basket. For this basket, I wanted to create something a little different. I'm using some white lavender and these lamb's ear leaves that I think I got on Amazon as a garland a couple of years ago, and I'm still using some of the leaves from it. So I'm going to create my own picks, and this is something that you can do with anything. If the pick isn't what you're looking for, take it apart and put on your own stuff. These baskets sell really well for me, so I thought I would make this one a little bit farmhouse, but still more neutral so it would blend in with any type of decor. I'm using a few pieces of this foam that came from a garden knee pad. I'm just going to wedge it in. I'm not going to use any glue to hold it in place because I want this to be removable. To make it easier for you to find out when I upload something new, click the bell next to the subscribe button. If you click all, you won't miss out on anything I have to share. The final project I have for you today. Whatever you want to call it. Anyhow, sometimes you just have to be patient with these pens and they will work. Even though they feel empty, there's usually still a lot of paint left in the tube. Wrap it around a couple times in front of the little short piece of wood and then tie it off at the back. I have 6 short mason jars and I've got some Dollar Tree sand that I'm just going to put at the bottom of them. Today I went to my Dollarama store. Yes, I did. It's right around the corner from my grocery store. So I jumped in there and I found these succulents. Now, I love all the succulent displays that people are making, but I'm not too keen on some of them that look, the ones that have different colors in them, I don't really like. I found 3 of them that are just green, but then different shapes. So what I'm going to do is just put 1 succulent in each of these jars, and then I have these other purple flowers that I'm going to put in the other 3 jars. And here's how it looks. The second project I have for you today is this raw wooden crate. I did take it outside already and gave it a little bit of a sanding. There were some rough edges on it. I'm going to be painting it with just some latex paint. This is a color, it's called Mushroom, and it's left over from when I painted my great room. I really like the color. It's very similar to Waverly chalk paint in mineral, I believe, but I'm just going to give this 1 coat because I have some other plans for it as well. I'm going to turn this crate into a vintage garden crate. I'm using these stencils that I picked up at a dollar store a couple of years ago, and I'm just going to cut the letters in half and then pop out the insides. I'm going to use the charcoal Rust-Oleum chalk paint color and the makeup sponge to apply the paint to the stencils. I'm going to put lettering on all 4 sides of this crate. This side will have the word herbs on it and the other side is going to have seeds, and then I'm going to put something different on the slatted sides. I'm also going to add a couple of hand lettered words. On the top, I'm going to put organic and local on the bottom. And when I do my hand lettering, I always start in the center of the word. So A was the middle letter, and that's where I started, and then I work my way forwards and then backwards. That usually helps me to get the word more centered, but as you can see, I'm a little off today. I think it'll look okay once I've got everything complete. I'm always seeing some vintage crates with the labels kind of off kilter a little bit, so I'm not too worried about that. To make the crate look even more distressed, I'm just going to sand down the words a little bit, and then I'm going to use bare dark wax, and I like to apply the wax with a soft rag. I usually use an old t-shirt, and I'm just going to layer it a few different times just to make sure I get the color I want. The last thing I'm going to do is take that makeup sponge that I used to apply the stencils. I'm going to add a little bit of the charcoal chalk paint every once in a while, and I'm just rubbing that makeup sponge all the way across in a few spots just to give it more of a dirty and scuffed up look. On the opposite sides of the herbs and seeds words, I stenciled in the number 4, just using a few of the different sizes of stencils that I have in the same type of design. Here's what I chose to make over for the Ugly Thrift Challenge. It's a mailbox and it was $4.99 at Value Village. The original piece had these Velcro glued on and I just needed to get the glue off. So I'm taking my handy scraper from the Dollar Tree and just gently pushing underneath the glue so I don't pull off any of the wood. I'm going to start by giving the mailbox 1 coat of this Ultra Cover Rust-Oleum flat black paint. And the reason I'm doing that is because the end result is going to be a white mailbox. However, sometimes I have found that with white, some of these other colors, these floral colors, might bleed through the chalk paint. So I'm going to take this step and do it black first, so that will block anything from bleeding through onto the white paint. I'm also using my spray paint trigger that I picked up at a hardware store a while ago. I'll have that link down in my description box. It really helps to be able to control the paint a little bit better because it's a trigger rather than just pressing down with the nozzle. The black paint is fully dry now, so I'll be starting to do my coats of white. I'm just using a brush that I picked up at the dollar store, and the paint that I'm using is just latex house paint. I ended up giving this mailbox 3 coats of white paint. I'm going to do a grain sack striping on this, and I've never done this before, but I've seen a few other YouTubers do it, so I've been inspired by them. What I'm going to do first is lay down 3 strips of the painter's tape. And the reason I need 3 of them is that I'm using the center one as a spacer, which will then be removed, and that will become the first stripe. Now that I've got the black all on there, I'm going to just remove the painter's tape very gently. The paint is still a little bit wet, and then I'll wait for it to dry and start with the second stripes. To get this so it was worth it. Here I'm painting on the secondary stripes, and they're just 2 thin stripes next to the big thick one that is the center stripe. Here's the reveal, and I'm crossing my fingers in the background, hoping that it turned out the way it was supposed to. And yes, it did. So I've got a thick stripe in the center, and I've got 2 thin stripes on the other side, which gives it the look of a grain sack striping. I'm so excited that I actually made this work. Now I'm just going to take my sandpaper again and go around some of the edges and pull off some of that white paint. Some of the sanding will go all the way down to the pine color underneath, but some of it will also show the black, which gives it a really beautiful look and texture. Since this is a mailbox, I decided to put the word mail on it. I'm using my 3-inch tall simple script stencils. I'll have a link for those down in my description box. These are my most favorite stencils that I use. I love this simple script. Did was take this board outside and give it a good sanding. Of course, I had taken off all the hearts and everything that was on it, but it did need a good sanding just to kind of get some of that print off and the layers a little bit. It's going to turn out a little bit of a shiplap look, but I am going to turn this and make it a vertical sign and rather than a horizontal sign. Out of the wreath sign, I'm using one of the wreaths, and I'm going to be using the wood welcome sign as well. I'm going to be taking some burnt umber here and just painting the wreath so it's not so white. I want it to have more of a grapevine look to it. The original wreath design had these green hydrangea blossoms on it, and I've got a few more, so I decided I'm going to do an ombre effect. I'll start at the bottom with the dark leaves, and then I'll move to the lighter leaves, and then finally the white at the top. I flipped the wreath around so you can see it a little bit better. So I've got the dark green on the bottom, and then I'm gradually moving up to a softer green, and now I'm working on the white. Now that the wreath is complete, I'm going to do a little bit of fixing up of this wood welcome sign. I do like the color gray, so I'm going to keep it that way, but I'm going to distress it with a little bit of dark gray from Rust-Oleum, so the dark charcoal, and then I'm also going to take some of the linen white and give it a little bit of distressing that way too. I'm using a combination of Weldbond glue, which is my favorite permanent glue, and hot glue just to keep it in place while the Weldbond glue has a chance to dry. The reason I like the Weldbond is it only needs about 15 minutes or so to set up, and it's still going to be tacky, but it holds things in place. I'm going to put my last name, and then underneath that I'm going to change into a different font style and just put the letters EST, which is short for established, and then the year we got married, which is 1991. Here's how it looks hanging on my wall. My second project for you today is using this thrifted candle holder, I think. I don't really know what it is, but I think it's meant for a candle, and it's wire and it's this beautiful green color. I love the color, but it is missing one of the pegs. So I want to camouflage that a little bit. So I'm using some of this white cotton rope from Dollarama, and I'm going to start weaving it in and out at the bottom and go up about 4 or 5 rows just to give this a little bit more of an interesting texture. I'm starting off by hot gluing the rope where that broken piece of wire is, and then I'm going to weave in and out all the way around in a circle and glue it every once in a while. Mostly when I get back to the center, I'm going to do that again. And I'll do this, like I said, about 4 or 5 rows until I like the look of it. Here's where I thought I would add some of the rope in the center a little bit, but I really didn't like how it was working out because the wire sections were farther apart, so it didn't look nice and tight like it did down at the bottom. So I ended up just pulling this out and skipping it. Now I need to cover up the broken piece at the top. So I'm going to go ahead and start at the very top, just winding some of this cotton rope all the way around. And then I'm going to go down about 3 inches and then tuck in the last little piece and glue it in place. Here you can see what I mean about going down a few inches. I'm just gluing probably a couple of times on the rope each time I spin it around. And I just want to make sure that I cover that broken piece. I love using these little birds and tiny little creatures in my farmhouse design. So I found this little bird. He was part of a wind chime set, so that's why he's got all these little holes. I'm just using some of this dry deck spackle, and this is my absolute favorite to use. It's the one that is pink and then dries white. But the other thing I really love about this is you don't have to really sand it, especially on a something like this, which is ceramic. I just actually took my finger and rubbed it all off nice and smooth. And I wanted texture on this little bird, so I didn't mind if there was a little bit of a bumpiness to it. I gave my little bird a couple of coats of white chalk paint, and now I'm going to mix up a green wax to go on top of it. The first color is Antique Sky from Martha Stewart chalk paint, and that's already in the bowl. And now I'm just adding a little bit of the eucalyptus, which is the darker green shade. I have a bottle of Folk Art Home Decor clear wax, and I'm going to add some of that right into my bowl and mix it together. ensuring that it's all blended together nicely. And if I need to add any more color, I can do that as well. So here's my little white birdie. I'm going to use a really soft brush to apply the wax, making sure I get it really heavy in, not super heavy, but heavy enough in all of the cracks and crevices. Once I have it the way I want it to look, I'm going to take a baby wipe and just gently dab at the raised areas to bring out some more of the white, and the green will stay in all of the cracks. The last thing to do is use a lot of hot glue right on the very top and put the bird down so he has a cute little perch on top of this lantern. The last project I have for you today is using this spindle that came from a bed that was at the side of the road. And this round wood disc is from Michael's. I can't find any of the ones that they have at the Dollar Tree. My Dollar Trees don't seem to carry a lot of wood crafts. So I went to Michael's and I found these for $1.50, which is only 25 cents more than I would have to pay at the Dollar Tree, since in Canada you pay $1.25 and sometimes $1.50 for items at the Dollar Tree. I'm using the gel stains again, but this time I've blended maple and walnut together because this original spindle has a bit of a reddish tone to it, and I wanted to try and match up the wood round as best that I could. So I'm just putting it on with a old piece of t-shirt. I'm going to go ahead and let it dry for a little bit, and then I'll add a second coat to darken it up a little bit more. While I wait for the stain to fully dry, I'm taking this tin bucket. Now, this is something I've had in my stash for a really long time. I honestly don't even remember where I got it from, but I'm taking it out to my garage and I'm going to give it a couple of coats of flat white spray paint. Now my disc is dry, so what I'm going to do is apply the glue to it. I'm going to use my Weldbond glue, a really nice amount on the outside, and then I'll use some hot glue on the inside to make sure that it stays secure while I continue to work with it. I'm also going to add a bead of the Weldbond glue all the way around because I want to make sure that this stays really secure. It's a gift from my neighbor. She's the one who had the bed and put it out at the curb because it was broken in a couple of spots. I found out that it was her great grandmother's bed and decided that I needed to give her something as a reminder of the bed. She's an avid gardener, so I thought making a nice little pedestal pot might be the perfect gift. I'm drilling a hole that is the same size as the screw I'm going to be using in the middle of the spindle, and I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom of the pot. I don't want to use just glue to put these two together, although I am going to use a bit of hot glue to just help secure it a little bit better so it doesn't wiggle. But I decided that I wanted to put a screw down the center of the pot and into the spindle. Now comes the tricky part, being able to see that screw hole in the little screw hole of the pot. I did get it a little off center, but I was able to find, there it is, there's the hole, and I was able to put the screw in just using my ratchet screwdriver. So what I did next was try to get some of that glue the same color, and it really wasn't working out. So I'm taking some of this rusty wood filler. It's a rusty color, not rust itself. And I'm going to go ahead and fill that in, wipe off any of the excess, and then once this is dry, I'll be able to sand down the excess again and give it a nice coat of stain. I used a baby wipe to go across the spindle and just pull off any of the extra wood filler that was there so I wouldn't have to worry about trying to sand that off. To add the final touch for this pot, since I don't know what type of decor they have in their home, I decided to keep it simple. I'm going to add some of this jute rope just in between those two ridges there, so it'll have a nice little design. And then I'll add a simple little shoestring bow with some jute twine. I love how this one turned out. I love the simplicity of it, and my neighbor really loves it too. I've already given it to her, and it's going to be a really sweet memory of her grandma. DIY number one is using this piece of wood. It was 6 feet long and I cut it down to two 3 foot sections. It's just a piece of plywood. It was already this width. I'm just using a regular latex house paint to give it one good coat. So what I did is go over to my Cricut Joy and I used this plastic poster board that you can get at Michael's, and I cut out some stencils to say welcome. Now, I thought I had all my measurements correct, but unfortunately, I'm not able to use the stencil this time. But because I can cut out the letters and use the stencil itself, it's doing double duty. So I've cut out a stencil and I've also cut a reverse stencil using the letters. So I could take the letters, put them down, and then paint over them and have the background color showing through the letters. Anyhow, I'm not going to show you any more of this because I can't use it this time, but hopefully you'll see me use this in another project soon. Instead, I cut out a piece of cardstock with an open frame. So this is a 4 inch by 4 inch frame, and that will make sure that my letters are all the same size and they don't go any bigger or smaller. So of course for the O, I didn't put an O. I'm going to draw a cute little sunflower. So I'm just using the top of this paint bottle to create the circle in the center. And then again, I'm just going to freehand some petals all the way around. When I'm painting by hand, I make sure that I use the right brush for the job. This one is a flat 1/2 inch brush. It has a square edge to it, which is going to help me create all of these corners on my letters. It's also going to help me create the width of the stems of my letters. They're going to be exactly the same. You'll see here in a minute what I mean. I'm going to be able to just take my brush and drag it down the stick or stem of the letter, and it's going to be the same size all the way through. Another tip I have for you is to turn your project around. Instead of trying to make your brush fit where you need it to be, turn the piece of wood. I was flipping this piece of wood around all over the place, just making sure that I could get my angle with the brush in the right spot, and it would make it much easier for me to complete. For the sunflower, I painted the circle black, and now I'm just using an acrylic paint in just the basic color yellow, and I'm going to go all the way around the petals. I thought at first I would make the little smaller petals behind a different color, but I decided to just do it all yellow first. Now I've added a little bit of a burnt orange color, and I'm taking a smaller brush and I'm starting where the black circle is and just dragging that out a little bit. I actually have a blend of the yellow and the orange together because I don't want it to be a really bright orange. But this way I can do some nice shading and give each of those petals their own dimension. Then I went back in with some more of the yellow and just added a little highlighting to each of the petals, a little bit down towards the bottom and then just a little bit towards the top as well, just on one side. Using a nice sage green color, I just drew a few different sized petals coming out of the sunflower. Once the paint was fully dry, I wanted to give it even more highlighting. So this is just a chalk marker that I picked up at a dollar store, and I'm just outlining each of the petals. I also added some lines at the bottom of the petals just to show sort of the creases that you can sometimes see in flower petals. Next, I used a black marker to kind of do the same thing as I did with the white marker, just to highlight those little creases a little bit more.
Then using a dry brush, I just pounced some yellow into the middle of the flower. I think it turned out pretty cute. To make the sign look a little bit old and distressed, I'm just using the same paintbrush that I used for the letters, and I'm just brushing it up against the edge of the sign all the way around. The final step for this sign is to just use a makeup sponge and draw a little bit of a line just on the left-hand side of the letters. I didn't want to go all the way around, but I did want the black to stand out a little bit, and that touch of yellow did the trick. DIY number 2 is using the drawer from this taters and onion box. I spent a whole bunch of time out in my garage this past weekend working on just painting up some wood items. So I'm giving this 2 good coats of my white latex house paint. This is the front of the drawer, and I just love these little buttons. I think it gives it a lot of character. I'm just going to take some fine grit sandpaper and sand off some of the white so you can see some of the darker wood underneath. Quite a while back, I took apart some bed frames, and this is one of the bed posts from the headboard. It's got this little piece of wood that just doesn't want to come out. So I'm going to take a couple of little saws and just do my very best to cut it off. I also sanded down the leg quite a bit just using a fine grit sandpaper. I wanted to get some of the shine off, and that would also help to clean it. I also then went down a little bit to the bare wood in some spots. You can see that here. So the gel stain that I'm using, which is by Varathane in the color dark walnut, and that would just show up so much nicer than the reddish brown it was to begin with. I'm going to leave the stain on for a good hour till it's almost fully dry, and then I'm going to take another clean cloth and just buff it down. This is a piece of 2 by 6 that I had in my garage. It was actually a scrap wood piece that I picked up at my local hardware store. Make sure you go and ask them. In the cutting section, they're always doing cuts for people, and there's always stuff left over. And usually you can get it for a super good price. I think I paid $3 for like 10 pieces of all of these. And I know in some hardware stores you can even get them cheaper than that. So I'm using the same gel stain, and I'm going to use the same rag, just put it on pretty heavily and then let it dry. The dark walnut on the raw piece of wood looked a little different than the actual bedpost, so I decided just to take my cocoa bean chalk paint, which is a beautiful rich brown, and just do some dry brushing on it to give it just a bit of a deeper color. I'm going to use a different way of putting these together. These are called wood screw stud pins. They look like a screw, but there's no head on them, and that allows you to screw it down into a piece of wood and then screw another piece of wood on top. I'm going to go ahead and drill the size of the screw down into the 2 by 6, and then I'll do the same for the wood post. So I'm going to screw the bottom portion into the 2 by 6, and then I'm going to take the bedpost and screw that on top. I'm also going to use some Weldbond glue to make sure that both pieces of wood are securely fastened to each other with the screw, but also with the wood glue. That'll just make sure that it has a really good hold. I'm going to drill a hole in the top of the bedpost so it fits my screw, and I'll also do the same thing for the bottom of the drawer. Then I can screw them both together, and I have a gorgeous plant stand.
DIY number 3 is starting off by using this piece of Dollar Tree sign. It's just a leftover chunk that I had, and I'm making a hexagon shape, which is the shape of a stop sign. And it was a little tricky trying to get all of these angles right and the measurements right, but I finally figured it out. And I am going to go ahead and just use my utility knife to make the cuts. Next, I'm using some of these skinny pieces of bamboo. You could just use some popsicle sticks. This is just what I happen to have on hand. And I'm going to glue them with my hot glue gun on each corner. I need to be able to have somewhere to glue on my pieces of wood that I'm going to be creating the crate out of. So I can't use anything square because these aren't square corners. So this is what I figured out to do, and I just made sure that they were tall enough to accommodate 2 pieces of my wood. Now that I've got the vertical pieces all done, it's time to add the horizontal pieces. I'm using these little sticks that come from Dollarama. They're little wood garden stakes, super easy to cut. If you don't have anything like this, you could definitely use jumbo popsicle sticks or even paint stir sticks. I'm going to hot glue them down, finish the first row all the way around, and then add a second row on top of that. I'm going to paint the whole thing dark brown with this cocoa bean chalk paint by Rust-Oleum, and then I'm going to give it a bit of distressing with some black and the clay color from Martha Stewart vintage chalk paints. Using some of this jute rope that I get from the Dollar Tree, I'm going to cut out 2 equal lengths. I'm going to feed the rope into the basket, then hot glue it in place, leaving about a ½ inch at the top. I'll hot glue the other side as well, and then I'll hot glue the 2 pieces of rope together. This will make a really nice high-end finished look for this little crate. I did the same for the second piece of rope, and now I have 2 loops for a hanger. I'm going to take another piece of rope and just wrap it around a few times to create the hanging portion of this planter. Then I added some little vines, and I think it looks absolutely adorable. This is the thrift store piece that I am going to flip today. When I saw it at the thrift store, I fell in love. I think it's the cutest little thing. It's wood, it's iron, it's farmhouse, it's rustic, and I just thought it would be the perfect item for this flip today. I'm planning on using this or having someone use this as an outdoor piece, so I decided to use flat white trim clad rust paint, which is an exterior paint. It's oil based and it will definitely stand the test of time. I started off using a foam brush, and I'm doing the interior first because I'm really good at painting the outside of things, and then when I paint the inside I just get totally covered with paint. And because this is oil based, it takes a little bit more effort to get it off of your skin, so I thought I would try and be smart this time. So partway through I decided to switch to just a really old cheap paintbrush. The foam brush wasn't working. It just was bending too much and it was taking me too long to get things painted and covered nicely. So just using this old brush that I can just toss when I'm finished was perfect. I just really love how bright and cheerful this is starting to look. And as I was going, I decided that I was not going to paint the ironwork white. Some of it ended up getting painted white. As you can see, there's some sections there, and I'm actually doing it right now. But I did change my mind and decided to do the iron in a different color. So here's 2 coats of the white. As a little bit of the wood is still showing through, but that's okay. It gives it a little bit of a rustic feel. And now I'm using a small paintbrush and again the Trempcad paint in flat black to paint all of the ironwork. If you're not already subscribed to Jamie over at Border Bananas, I would love for you to do so and tell her I sent you. Just recently, I paid a visit to the Habitat for Humanity side of the sign. Using my very favorite
I found this pair of lanterns on overstock.ca, and for the two of them it was $136. I created mine for less than $8. Here's how I did it. So these are the supplies that I'm going to use for this DIY. First, I picked up this solar lantern at my Dollarama. It was $4. And it comes with a stake, so it's actually meant to be pushed into the ground or into a flower pot, but I'm going to use this as the top of my lantern. Then from scrap wood, I have this a railing post. I think it's probably about 4 feet in length. I'm not sure if I'm going to use the full length of that. And then I also just have some bits of scrap wood here. This is a fence post cap. Not sure if I'll be using that, and just another little piece of scrap wood. And this is a bracket that I had just hanging around the house. It's actually a shelf bracket, but I'm going to use it as the decorative part of the lantern, and then the lantern will end up sitting on top here at the end of it. The first step was to cut off one of the ends of the railing post because they both have angles on them. So I did this outside with my jigsaw. The next step is to take my sanding block and just soften up the edges of where I cut and just make sure that everything's nice and smooth for when I spray paint. The sanding block that I'm using came from a dollar store. What I'm doing here is starting some screws into the back of the largest block that I have. This is going to be used as a stabilizer for the post. I'll be placing the lantern post inside the pot. I'm just going to drill the screw down far enough so I see the tip of it at the bottom. My apologies for this next part. I actually don't know what happened to the footage, but you can see here that I screwed 4 screws into the post from the bottom up. Now it's time to add the bracket onto the post, and I'm using 2 black screws and my cordless drill, and I'm just going to screw those in. So this is what my project looks like so far with the post and the bracket screwed on. I've got everything assembled, so now it's time to paint. The first thing I'm doing here is just cleaning off the planter because it's in pretty rough shape from being outside for a few years. I'm using Rust-Oleum flat black paint to give this one good coat, and then I'll be using the hammered metal finish, also in black, to give it the look of metal. I've flipped it around and I'm starting to paint the top part, and I'm just going to go around the edges, and on the inside of the pot I'm going to just go down to that first lip because you won't really see too much more of that once I fill up the pot. While the pot dries, I'm going to paint the post and the bracket. The coat of black spray paint is dry, so I'm going to now use this hammered metal finish from Tremclad in the color of black and do a nice coat all over the pot and all over the post and the bracket. This piece of scrap wood I'm going to use as the base of the lantern because I'll be able to use one of the holes of the brackets to actually screw this in. So right now I'm just giving it a good sanding because I do want to paint this black as well. Okay, so I have to apologize again. My husband kept coming into the garage and talking to me, so I got really distracted and missed out on some of the pieces of video. So I do apologize for that. What you see here is the lantern glued onto the piece of black wood, and I used the Weldbond glue that you can see on the side of the screen. The Weldbond glue is really good for outdoor projects and indoor projects because it glues to all sorts of different materials. Just for good measure, I'm adding some hot glue. Now I'm going to just place the glued lantern on the piece of wood on top of the bracket, and there is a screw hole on the bracket right on at the front portion that I'm going to use to just screw the piece of wood on and hold it in place. Before I use the screw into the wood, I'm going to use some hot glue just so the piece of wood will be steady and I won't have to worry about hanging onto it while I work with the screwdriver. Here's the lantern all assembled, and right now it's just sitting in the pot. So my next step is to actually fill the pot and make the lantern more sturdy. The first piece of wood that I screwed the post to is acting as a base for the bottom of the pot, and now I'm going to take some river rocks that I used in a previous project and that I no longer use, and I'm going to pour those into the bottom of the pot to keep the wood base stable. So this is some dirt that I have just in one of the other pot. I'm just going to fill that in, and then I'm probably going to put some more rocks on top of it. Just to make sure that it's going to be nice and sturdy and it's not going to tip over. These are all the blooms that I'm going to use for this arrangement for right now. I think they're really pretty. They're nice and white, and I've got some foliage leaves here that are kind of going to complement the inside of the flowers. So I'm just going to work. The video, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to click the bell to get notified when I upload new videos. Thanks for watching!